The classroom buzzed with nervous energy as 30 alien students waited for their new instructor. The Advanced Emergency Response classroom at the Galactic Medical Academy had never been this tense before. After all, it wasn't every day that a human, a Deathworlder, would be teaching them. "I heard they actually touch injured bodies with their bare hands," whispered Blue, their watery form rippling with excitement. The young Aquarian's liquid body shifted in its containment suit, creating small waves that reflected the bright classroom lights. Spark, a Volti student whose energy-based form crackled with skepticism, floated slightly away from their desk. "That's barbaric. Why would anyone do that when we have perfectly good medical scanners?" "Perhaps there is logic we do not yet understand," suggested Rock, their crystalline form catching the light as they carefully arranged their learning tablets. The Silicate student was known for being methodical and thorough in their studies. The classroom fell silent as the door slid open. In walked a human male of average height, carrying what looked like a large red bag over his shoulder. The students stared at his solid form, some with fascination, others with barely concealed horror. He wore the standard white medical instructor's uniform, but what caught everyone's attention was the strange box he placed on his desk, something that looked decidedly low-tech. "Good morning, class. I'm Professor Sam Harris, and I'll be your emergency response instructor this term." His voice was clear and confident, showing no sign of discomfort despite being the only human in the room. "I come from Earth, and yes, before you ask, I will be teaching you some techniques that might seem primitive to you." Blue's water form rippled with barely contained questions. Sam noticed and smiled. "You can ask whatever you want. That's why we're here." "Professor," Blue's translator conveyed their excited tone, "is it true that humans physically interact with patients during treatment?" "Absolutely," Sam replied, opening the red bag. "In fact, that's going to be a major part of this course. Sometimes, the most reliable diagnostic tool is your own hands, or whatever appendage your species uses for physical manipulation." A wave of murmurs swept through the classroom. Spark's energy form flickered with disbelief. "But Professor, surely that's dangerous. The risk of contamination, infection, or accidental energy transfer." Sam pulled out what looked like 2 rubber gloves from his bag. "That's why we use protective equipment. Simple, yes, but effective. Remember, not every emergency happens in a perfectly equipped medical bay. Sometimes you're stuck in the middle of nowhere with nothing but basic supplies." Rock raised their crystalline arm, light refracting through it in complex patterns. "Professor, our standard protocols strictly forbid physical contact with patients unless all other options are exhausted. Are you suggesting we ignore these protocols?" "Not at all," Sam said, walking between the desks. "I'm suggesting we expand them. The galaxy is full of surprises, and sometimes the difference between life and death is being willing to try something unconventional." He reached his desk and pulled out something that made several students recoil, a training dummy shaped like a standard humanoid. "This is what we'll be practicing on. By the end of this term, each of you will know how to perform emergency procedures without relying on advanced technology." Blue's water form swirled with excitement, while Spark crackled with nervous energy. Rock remained still, but their crystalline surface reflected a slightly different pattern, indicating deep thought. "Remember," Sam continued, his expression serious but kind, "every technique I teach you has saved countless lives on Earth and other worlds. They might seem basic, but they work. And sometimes, basic is exactly what you need." He looked around the classroom, meeting the visual sensors of each student. "Next class, we'll start with something simple, checking vital signs without scanners. Please read chapters 1 through 3 of Manual Medical Assessment before then." As the students filed out after class, their reactions varied wildly. Blue was practically splashing with enthusiasm. Spark seemed to be trying to maintain as much distance as possible from the training dummy, and Rock was methodically recording every word the professor had said. None of them knew it yet, but this class would change not just their views on medicine, but their understanding of humans forever. The next class started with Professor Sam Harris standing next to the training dummy, which now lay flat on a table in the center of the room. The alien students gathered around, maintaining what they considered a safe distance. "Today," Sam announced, pulling on a pair of medical gloves, "we're going to learn about cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or CPR for short." Blue's liquid form rippled with interest as they moved closer, while Spark hovered nervously at the back of the group. Rock stood perfectly still, their crystalline surface reflecting the scene like a multifaceted mirror. "But Professor," Blue's translator chirped, "why would anyone need to restart a circulatory system manually? The standard tissue regenerator can do that in seconds." Sam smiled patiently. "And what happens when your regenerator fails? Or when you're responding to an emergency in a radiation zone that disrupts electronic equipment?" He placed his hands on the dummy's chest. "Sometimes the difference between life and death is knowing how to use what you have, even if it's just your own two hands." He demonstrated the proper hand position for chest compressions. Several students' translation devices made distressed clicking sounds as they watched him press down on the dummy's chest. "This is barbaric." Spark's energy form flickered intensely. "You're literally breaking the patient's skeletal structure." "Sometimes we have to cause minor damage to prevent death," Sam explained calmly. "Ribs can heal. A stopped heart usually can't restart itself." Rock raised their crystalline appendage. "Professor, I have analyzed the force you're using. Wouldn't such pressure crush most species' internal organs?" "Good question," Sam nodded. "That's why we need to learn the appropriate modifications for different species. For example, aquarians like Blue would need a different kind of pressure wave manipulation." He turned to Blue. "Would you like to volunteer for a demonstration?" Blue's water form swirled excitedly as they moved forward. Sam pulled out a special containment suit designed for training. "For water-based life forms," he explained, "we use rhythmic wave propagation instead of direct compression. The principle is the same, maintaining circulation, but the technique is adapted to the patient's physiology." The class watched in fascination as Sam demonstrated the modified technique on Blue's volunteer form. The water within the containment suit pulsed in controlled waves, mimicking the natural circulation patterns of aquarian biology. "For energy beings like Spark," Sam continued, "we use electromagnetic pulses generated by simple mechanical means. And for crystalline life forms like Rock, we can use resonant frequencies created by basic striking patterns." The students began taking notes frantically. This was unlike anything they'd learned before. "But remember," Sam stressed, "these techniques aren't just about the physical motions. You need to understand why they work. The underlying principles of maintaining life are universal, even if the methods vary." He spent the next hour teaching them how to check for signs of life without scanners, how to position different species for optimal recovery, and how to recognize emergency situations by sight and touch alone. By the end of class, even Spark had cautiously approached the dummy to practice. Their energy forms still crackled with nervousness, but there was a new determination in their movements. "Next class," Sam announced as they finished, "we'll learn about something really interesting: stopping severe bleeding without using healing gel." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Blue's form rippled with anticipation, while Rock's surface showed complex patterns indicating deep calculation. Even Spark, despite their initial skepticism, found their energy form pulsing with curiosity. As the students left, Sam overheard Blue telling their classmates, "Maybe these primitive techniques aren't so primitive after all. They're just different." Sam smiled to himself. They were beginning to understand that sometimes the simplest solutions could be the most reliable. The real challenge would be getting them to trust their own abilities as much as they trusted their technology. The Galactic Medical Academy's annual showcase was supposed to be a simple affair. Students and faculty gathered in the main hall to display their latest medical innovations, with hovering screens showing advanced healing techniques and tables lined with gleaming medical devices. Blue floated near their display about underwater healing chambers, their liquid form moving smoothly within their containment suit. Rock stood proudly next to their crystalline regeneration matrix, while Spark demonstrated energy transfer techniques with controlled bursts of power. Professor Sam Harris walked between the displays, nodding approvingly at his students' work. He stopped at Blue's station, examining the complex water pressure diagrams. "Excellent work integrating traditional methods with water pulse therapy," he commented. Blue's form rippled with pride. Then it happened. The lights flickered once, twice, and went out. The emergency lights kicked in, casting an eerie red glow across the hall. But something was wrong. None of the medical devices were working. The backup power systems had failed completely. "Everyone stay calm," one of the faculty members called out. But panic was already spreading through the crowd. Suddenly, a bright flash lit up the far corner of the hall. A young Voltai student, barely in their first year, had lost control of their energy form. Without the usual containment fields to help regulate their power, their body was pulsing with dangerous levels of electricity. "My stabilizers aren't working." The student cried out, their voice translated through emergency backup systems. Sparks flew from their form, causing nearby students to back away in fear. The faculty rushed to help, but without functioning equipment, they could only watch helplessly. Standard protocols required energy regulation devices that were now useless. "Move aside." Sam's voice cut through the chaos. He ran toward the struggling student, carrying his ever-present red emergency bag. "Professor, you can't help," Spark called out, their own energy form flickering with concern. "Without stabilization equipment." "There's always a way," Sam interrupted, pulling what looked like simple rubber mats and copper wire from his bag. "Blue, Rock, Spark, I need your help." The three students hesitated for just a moment before moving forward. Sam quickly laid out the rubber mats in a circle around the distressed student. "Rock, I need you to create a crystal channel for excess energy. Remember the resonance patterns we practiced?" Sam's voice was calm but urgent. Rock's crystalline form shifted, creating a complex pattern of energy-conducting surfaces. "Like this, Professor." "Perfect. Spark, you'll help direct their energy flow through Rock's crystal matrix. Blue, your water form can help insulate and cool the system." Working together, they created a makeshift energy containment field. Sam used the copper wire to create a simple circuit, grounding the excess energy through Rock's crystal structure. Blue's water form provided crucial cooling, while Spark helped guide their fellow students' chaotic energy into the improvised system. The young Voltai's form gradually stabilized, their dangerous energy pulses becoming more controlled. By the time the main power systems came back online 10 minutes later, the crisis was already over. The hall was silent except for the hum of reactivating equipment. Everyone stared at the small group, a human professor and 3 alien students who had just saved a life using nothing but basic materials and quick thinking. "That was remarkable," the Academy's head administrator admitted, their translator barely catching the whispered words. Sam smiled at his students. "This is why we learn to work without technology. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most reliable." Blue's water form swirled with excitement. "We actually did it. We saved them without any advanced equipment." Indeed, Rock's crystalline surface pulsed with new patterns of understanding. "The principles you taught us, they'd really work." Spark floated closer to the rescued student, their energy form showing patterns of deep thought. "I never believed. I didn't think it was possible." As the crowd gathered around them, asking questions and expressing amazement, Sam watched his students with pride. They had just learned the most important lesson of all. That true medical skill wasn't about having the best technology, but about understanding the fundamental principles of life and being ready to use whatever tools were available. The young Voltai student looked at Sam with their energy form glowing steadily now. "Thank you, Professor. I think I understand now why we need to learn these primitive techniques." Sam nodded, already thinking about tomorrow's lesson. After this, he had a feeling his students would be much more interested in learning about human first aid techniques. The day after the emergency, Professor Sam's classroom was packed. Students from other classes had come to watch, filling every available space. Even a few faculty members stood at the back, trying to look casual about their presence. Sam walked in carrying not just his usual red bag, but several boxes of what looked like everyday items. The room fell silent as he began setting up his demonstration table. Yesterday, he began, we saw how basic materials can save lives. Today, we're going to learn how to make emergency medical tools from common objects. Blue raised their water form slightly. Professor, could you explain exactly how you knew those simple materials would help stabilize a volti? Good question. Sam pulled out a rubber mat, some wire, and various metal objects. Every species has basic physical properties. Volti are energy-based, so they follow fundamental laws of electricity. Understanding these basics lets you work with whatever materials you have. He turned to the class. For instance, what would you do if you needed to make a splint for a crystalline life form without proper medical equipment? Rock's surface shimmered with interest. But our crystal matrices require precise alignment tools. Or do they? Sam pulled out what looked like ordinary reflective sheets and some straps. If you understand how crystal structures work, you can use simple light refraction to check alignment. Watch. He demonstrated how to create a makeshift crystal alignment system using just the reflective material and natural light. Rock's surface pattern showed clear amazement. For water-based life forms, Sam continued, grabbing some flexible tubing and a small pump, we can create emergency containment and circulation systems using basic fluid dynamics. Blue moved closer, their water form rippling with curiosity as Sam quickly assembled a simple but effective emergency water form stabilizer. But these are just simple physical forces, Spark objected, their energy form flickering. Real medical emergencies are more complex. Are they? Sam smiled. Let's do an experiment. Spark, would you help me demonstrate? Somewhat nervously, Spark floated forward. Sam pulled out what looked like a basic magnetic field generator, modified with household items. This device, he explained, uses simple electromagnetic principles to help stabilize energy beings. It's not as efficient as your standard medical equipment, but it works. Want to try it? Spark cautiously moved closer to the device, their energy form visibly relaxed as it interacted with the magnetic field. This feels like a professional stabilizer. Because the underlying principle is the same, Sam explained. Advanced technology just makes it more efficient. He spent the next hour showing them how to create emergency medical tools for different species. A crystalline resonance chamber made from sound-reflecting materials. A water-form pressure regulator built from simple pumps. An energy field modulator using basic electromagnetic components. The students watched in fascination as each primitive device proved surprisingly effective. The key, Sam explained while fixing a new attachment to his makeshift energy stabilizer, is understanding why things work, not just how to use them. When you know the principles, you can improvise solutions. One of the faculty members in the back spoke up, but these methods seem so unreliable compared to our standard equipment. Reliability isn't just about complexity, Sam replied. Sometimes the simplest solution is the most reliable because there's less that can go wrong. Yesterday proved that. The young Volti student from yesterday's emergency sat in the front row, their energy form stable and bright. Professor Harris is right. If they hadn't known these techniques, I might not be here today. As the class ended, students crowded around the demonstration table, eager to examine the improvised medical devices. Blue was already trying to recreate the water pressure system, while Rock studied the crystal alignment tools with intense interest. Spark, hovering near Sam, spoke quietly. Professor, I apologize for doubting your methods before. I see now that understanding basic principles is just as important as having advanced technology. Sam smiled. That's the most important lesson of all. In medicine, It's not about having the fanciest tools. It's about knowing how to save lives with whatever you have. The Galactic Medical Academy's library had never been so busy. Students crowded around terminals displaying ancient human medical texts, while others practiced makeshift medical techniques in the study areas. At the center of this unusual activity sat Blue, their water form moving excitedly as they explained basic fluid pressure concepts to a group of fellow Aquarians. Their containment suit was decorated with hand-drawn diagrams of human first aid techniques. "Look at how simple yet effective this is," Blue demonstrated, using a flexible tube to create a controlled water current. "Humans have been using these principles for centuries." Nearby, Rock had set up a study group focusing on crystal-based life form emergency care. Their crystalline surface displayed educational patterns as they showed others how to use simple light sources for medical diagnosis. "The human approach to understanding crystal structures is fascinating," Rock explained, their surface gleaming with enthusiasm. They developed these techniques long before they had advanced scanning equipment. Even Spark, once the biggest skeptic, was now helping junior students understand basic energy containment principles. Their energy form glowed steadily as they demonstrated a simple grounding technique. Professor Sam walked into the library, pausing at the entrance to take in the scene. The head administrator floated beside him, their translator humming softly. "Remarkable," the administrator said. "A week ago, these students wouldn't have considered practicing medicine without full electronic assistance. Now look at them." Sam smiled as he watched Blue expertly demonstrate a water pressure regulation technique using nothing but basic materials. They're learning that good medicine isn't about having the most advanced technology. It's about understanding how life works at its most basic level. A group of medical faculty members had gathered around Rock's demonstration table, taking notes as the crystalline student explained how simple light refraction could diagnose structural issues in silicon-based life forms. "I must admit," one professor's translator clicked, "I was skeptical about introducing these primitive methods into our curriculum. But after seeing them in action during the power failure." Speaking of which, Sam gestured toward Spark, who was now confidently showing others how to create emergency energy containment fields with basic materials. "I believe someone has had a complete change of heart." Spark noticed them watching, and their energy form brightened. "Professor Harris, I've been studying human emergency medical histories. Did you know they developed their first electrical medical treatments using materials they found in nature?" "That's the beauty of human medical science," Sam replied. "We had to understand the basic principles because we didn't have advanced technology to rely on." The library's main screen suddenly lit up with a new academic announcement. HFY Course. Basic Physical Emergency Response Techniques, inspired by human medical practices. A cheer went up from the students. Blue's water form rippled with excitement, Rock's surface displayed patterns of approval, and Spark's energy form pulsed brightly. The administrator turned to Sam. "It seems your primitive techniques have sparked quite the revolution in our medical education system." "Not a revolution," Sam corrected gently. "Just a return to fundamentals. Sometimes you need to understand the basics before you can truly master the advanced techniques." As they watched, a young Volti student successfully created their first emergency energy containment field using simple materials. Their classmates applauded, their various forms showing expressions of approval in their own unique ways. "You've changed how we think about emergency medicine," the administrator admitted. "Perhaps we became too dependent on our advanced technology." Sam shook his head. "It's not about choosing between advanced technology and basic techniques. It's about having all the tools available to save lives, no matter the circumstances." Looking around the busy library, at students of all species learning and practicing together, Sam knew that the real breakthrough wasn't just in teaching human techniques. It was in helping them understand that true medical wisdom meant being prepared for anything. Professor Sam's classroom had been transformed. Instead of neat rows of desks, the room now featured multiple practice stations, each dedicated to a different species' emergency care needs. The walls displayed hand-drawn diagrams, showing how to adapt human first aid techniques for various alien physiologies. Today, Sam announced to his eager students, "You're going to teach me something new." Blue's water form rippled with surprise. "Us? Teach you?" "Exactly." Sam smiled. "You've learned the basic human techniques. Now show me how you've adapted them for your own species." Blue moved to the front of the class, their containment suit showing ripples of excitement. "I've been working on something interesting," they said, demonstrating with a simple tube system. "We can use human CPR principles to create emergency circulation for water-based life forms." The class watched as Blue showed how they had modified chest compression techniques into a wave-based system that worked perfectly for aquarian biology. Even Sam looked impressed. "Brilliant adaptation," he nodded. "Who's next?" Rock stepped forward, their crystalline surface gleaming under the classroom lights. "I've developed a modification of human diagnostic techniques," they explained, demonstrating with simple light sources and reflective surfaces. "By understanding how humans used physical examination, I created a way to check for crystal matrix damage using basic tools." The crystalline student showed how different light angles could reveal structural problems in silicon-based life forms, just like human doctors used physical examination to find injuries. Spark, their energy form now stable and confident, floated to the demonstration area. "I've combined human grounding techniques with our natural energy flow," they explained, showing a new device made from simple materials. "It's like human defibrillation, but adapted for energy beings." Sam walked between the stations, watching as students of different species practiced these new hybrid techniques. A group of gaseous beings had adapted human respiratory support methods for their composition. Some plant-based students demonstrated modified splinting techniques for their flexible structures. "This is exactly what I hoped would happen," Sam said, helping a metallic student adjust their technique. "You're not just learning human methods, you're making them better." The door opened, and several faculty members entered, including the head administrator. They moved through the room, observing the practice sessions with growing interest. "Remarkable," one professor's translator hummed. "They're creating entirely new medical techniques." Blue had moved to help a younger Aquarian student practice the wave-based CPR. "The key is understanding why human techniques work," they explained. "Once you know the principles, you can adapt them for anyone." Rock was carefully documenting each new adaptation, their crystalline surface recording the information in complex patterns. "We're creating a new medical manual," they explained to the visiting faculty. "Basic emergency care for all known species, using readily available materials." Spark demonstrated their energy containment technique to a group of fellow Volti students. "See? No complex technology needed, just an understanding of basic energy principles, just like humans taught us." Sam watched with pride as his students continued to innovate. What had started as simple human first aid lessons had evolved into something much more significant, a whole new approach to emergency medical care. "Your students have exceeded all expectations," the administrator said to Sam. "They're not just learning human techniques, they're creating a new standard for emergency medical response." "That's because they understood the most important lesson," Sam replied. "It's not about human medicine or alien medicine. It's about using what you know to help others, no matter what species they are." As the class continued, Sam saw the future of galactic medicine taking shape before his eyes. His students weren't just breaking down barriers between species, they were creating a universal approach to emergency care that anyone could learn and use. Basic human first aid techniques had sparked a revolution in medical training, but it was his students who were turning it into something even greater. They were proving that the best medical care didn't depend on advanced technology or species-specific knowledge. It came from understanding, adaptability, and the willingness to try new approaches. 3 months after Professor Sam Harris first introduced human first aid techniques to the Galactic Medical Academy, an emergency alert blared through the corridors. A transport ship had crashed near the academy. its systems completely fried by an unexpected solar flare. Multiple species injured, the announcement echoed. All medical staff and senior students report to emergency response stations. Sam rushed toward the crash site, but something made him stop at the entrance. His students were already there, and they were handling everything perfectly. Blue coordinated the water-based life form response team, their containment suit marked with emergency medical symbols. Set up wave pressure stabilizers here. They called out, their form moving with confident purpose. Use the manual circulation techniques for any unconscious Aquarians. Rock led the crystal being rescue effort, their surface glowing with diagnostic patterns. Check structural integrity using light refraction. They instructed their team. Remember, if the scanner's not working, your eyes and basic tools are just as good. Spark floated above the scene, their energy form steady and bright as they directed other Volti students. Establish manual grounding circuits first. Use the human-inspired containment fields. They're more reliable in these conditions. The crash had damaged most of the advanced medical equipment, but it didn't matter. Students of all species worked together, using their adapted human techniques alongside their traditional methods. A young Aquarian victim with a destabilized form was quickly stabilized using Blue's wave pressure system. A crystalline passenger with severe structural damage was diagnosed and treated using Rock's light refraction technique. Spark's team successfully contained and stabilized several energy beings using nothing but basic materials. The head administrator floated beside Sam, watching the scene unfold. A year ago, this would have been a disaster. They would have waited for the equipment to be repaired before even attempting treatment. Sam nodded, pride evident on his face. Now they don't even hesitate. Look at how naturally they combine advanced and basic techniques. Around them, students demonstrated perfect coordination between species. A gaseous being student used modified respiratory support techniques to help an injured plant-based life form. A metallic student applied adapted pressure techniques to help stabilize a silicon-based victim. Professor Harris called Blue from across the field. Come see this adaptation we created for multi-species trauma care. Sam walked over to find his 3-star students had developed a new emergency treatment station that could handle any species. Rock's crystal structure provided diagnostic capabilities. Blue's water form helped stabilize various life forms, and Spark's energy form powered basic but essential equipment. We combined everything you taught us, Rock explained, their surface showing complex medical patterns. Basic human techniques, adapted for each species, but working together as one system. Just like you said, Spark added, their energy form glowing steadily. Understanding the fundamentals means you can help anyone anywhere. As the last patients were stabilized and transported to the medical bay, the Academy's senior medical board arrived to evaluate the response. They found every single crash victim had been successfully treated, despite the lack of advanced equipment. Professor Harris, the head administrator, announced, their translator projecting clearly across the field. Your teaching methods have been approved for implementation across all galactic medical academies. From now on, every medical student in the galaxy will learn these fundamental techniques alongside our advanced methods. The students cheered, their various forms expressing joy in their unique ways. Sam looked at his first class, Blue, Rock, and Spark, who had helped prove that sometimes the simplest techniques could be the most valuable. You did this, he told them. You took basic human first aid and turned it into something universal, something that will save countless lives across the galaxy. Blue's water form rippled with pride. We just needed someone to show us that different doesn't mean primitive, and that understanding the basics, Rock added, their surface gleaming, is just as important as having advanced technology. Maybe, Spark concluded, their energy form pulsing brightly, we should stop calling them human techniques and start calling them universal emergency care. Sam smiled as he watched his students continue to treat the injured. They had not only learned his lessons, they had improved upon them, creating something new that would benefit all species. The future of galactic medicine would never be the same, and it all started with a simple first aid class.